Hello and welcome to MMA Crips Fighting Talk. On today's show, we'll be going 5 rounds of action from last night's UFC Fight Night 37 event, featuring all the main card bouts and our fighter and fight of the night. Okay, joining me on today's show, we have Greg Marshall, Brian Hunt and Derek Love. Say hello to our listeners, guys.
Hey, guys.
Hello, everybody.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Let's kick things off with the first main card bout of the evening for UFC Fight Night 37. We had Omari Akhmedov versus Gunnar Nelson. Now, on paper, both fighters sported a similar record and looked pretty well matched. The bout itself was fairly one-sided, as Gunnar Nelson managed to take the fight to the ground and control and advance his positions with ease, landing some nasty elbows in the process. Gunnar did go on to win the fight late in round 1 via guillotine choke to the excitement of Conor McGregor in the crowd. Greg, give us your thoughts on the fight and how impressive was Gunnar Nelson last night?
Well, Nelson was really impressive, wasn't he? He controlled the guy from start to finish. Then the boy he beat, the Akhmedov, he came down to welterweight for that fight. His first fight in the UFC, he fought at middleweight, and he won by KO in a fight of the night. So he was no weak opponent. Nelson seemed to have a new stroke to his arsenal. He had some good elbows in there, which I've never really seen him using too much before.
Yeah, they were vicious.
Yeah, he was hurting the guy bad with them. But I was never in doubt that he was going to get the submission, when you could see how easily he was controlling the guy, though.
He was just using them to advance his position too. It wasn't really to finish the fight, but
yeah.
They could have easily finished the fight.
Yeah, he just seemed to pop a few of them to kind of open the guy up, didn't he?
Yeah, absolutely brutal. Okay, Brian, give us your thoughts on the fight between Gunnar Nelson and Omari Akhmedov. And how impressed was you with Gunnar Nelson last night?
I think calling it a fight's a little bit inaccurate. I mean, it was more of a beatdown. Yeah, welcome to the UFC. Boom, firing squad. It's kind of tough. I mean, I was impressed. I mean, I was really impressed. But clearly, Gunnar needs to step it up a level in competition. I mean, he looked great beating that guy, but he's got to step it up. I mean, not him. The UFC has to step it up, and he's ready to fight top 15 people now. It's no more introduction to the UFC with this kid. He's legit. He's extremely legit, but now we need to see him against a little bit more legit competition.
Well, Brian, you say it wasn't a fight. It looked more like a sparring session for Gunnar last night. And considering Omari's record and how good he was, that's impressive. That was really impressive. And I totally agree that he needs someone in the top 15 now. Now, funny you say that, Brian, because he's not actually ranked in the top 15 now. Obviously, they haven't updated the rankings since UFC Fight Night 37. Where would you place him now in the rankings, Brian?
If we're talking UFC fighters, he's got to be approaching 10. I mean, he really does. It's I put him above Campman at this point in time, but maybe a fight with Campman's a little bit more fitting if Campman's still staying around. Damian Maia. I mean, do you have him fight Damian Maia at this stage?
You say Damian Maia, Brian. He looked like a replica of Damian Maia last night in his ground control. I would love to see that fight, just off stylistic-wise. Like, who would win the ground battle, the grappling battle between them both? Who do you think would win the grappling battle, Brian?
I'm not sure if it goes to the ground. I think he stands up with Damian. He says he's not a guy that fight plans, but I think he's going to just stand with Damian. I don't think he needs to go to the ground. His stand-up is looking very impressive, and I think it's superior to what Maia has. But again, the level of competition he's fought versus we've seen Maia fight, it's hard to judge. It's really hard to judge. So,
how about you, Greg? Would you like to see him face Damian Maia next?
I think it'd be interesting anyway, because he's got some solid jiu-jitsu as well, Nelson. He's a gold medalist Pan American, so he'd be able to compete with him anyway. I think the only thing I would say is maybe Maia's still just a wee bit too high up the rankings for him. I think he maybe really needs to aim for a Campton type.
For some reason, I just want to see him face a grappler. Just off his style. I really want to see how he holds up against some of the best grapplers. Maybe a Jake Shields, but obviously if Jake Shields beats Hector Lombard, then he's in line for a title shot. But if Hector Lombard defeats Jake Shields, that'll be an interesting battle. It really would. Be a good fight for Gunnar. That'll be his first real, actual, experienced contender who's been really around the block, if you know what I mean. Okay, let's bring you in on this, Derek. Give us your thoughts on the fight between Omari Akhmedov and Gunnar Nelson last night, and how impressive was Gunnar Nelson for you?
Gunnar Nelson is a monster. And, I just seen it for the first time last night. That kid, his ceiling is so high. He'd probably be a top 10 fighter soon, probably this year if he keeps fighting. If the UFC doesn't keep him out of the ring again for a year, however long he was out for. But, your guys' Damian Maia Gunnar Nelson matchmaking just seems like you're trying to get Damian Maia cut. That doesn't seem like a good fight to make it all right now. Damian Maia's coming off of 2 losses. I think if you want to see Gunnar Nelson in a good fight against a veteran, you buck him against Mike Pyle.
That's a good one. That really is. Why would you put him against Mike Pyle, by the way, anyway, Derek?
Mike Pyle sitting right at the edge of the top 15. If Gunnar Nelson can run through him, he's ready for the top 10. And Mike Pyle can test him more than any of these other guys have. Pyle's very well-rounded, as we all know.
Agreed.
I think that would be a good fight to see how ready Nelson really is.
Well, we gave Gunnar rave reviews just now, but there is one slight chink. Brian mentioned his stand-up's looking more improved. I was a little concerned with his stand-up last night. He was just walking in with his hands down. You could clearly see his game plan was to take the fight to the ground. He had no interest in striking. He was just looking for that one punch to set up the takedown. I actually called it about 10 seconds before he actually did it. I said he's going to punch him and he's going to go for the takedown. And also, he was pushing. Well, he wasn't pushing, but the pace he was setting, he was walking Omari back to the cage. So it was clear to see that he was planning on using the cage for his takedown too. And he never actually got the chance because the one punch he did fucking land, he actually knocked him down with and managed to get on top of him anyway. But I do believe he was looking to use the cage. But in future fights, I would like to see him with his hands up a little bit more. Don't get too confident and cocky about it. But, well, these SGB guys, they're really looking good. Okay, let's take things over to round 2. Brad Pickett versus Neil Seery. For this bout, Neil Seery was brought in as a replacement for the injured Uncle Creepy, Ian McCall. Seery was previously competing under the Cage Warriors banner, where he was riding a 4-fight win streak. This was also Brad Pickett's first fight in the UFC flyweight division. So both fighters looking to impress and put on a good performance for different reasons. Greg, did both fighters impress? And give us your thoughts on the fight.
Yeah, both fighters impressed. Seery obviously came in massive underdog, not expected to really give Pickett too much trouble, but he sure gave him trouble and finished the fight well. Pickett seemed to have the advantage easily in the first 2 rounds, although Seery kept coming. Third round, Seery won it on one of the scorecards, I think. It was a pity Pickett didn't get the fight with Uncle Creepy that was originally planned, because if he'd won that, it would have been a clear next contender for Demetrius Johnson. Obviously, beating Seery isn't really beating any kind of ranked fighter.
But you say that though, Greg. Do you think that it was obviously it was his first time at flyweight? Now his timing looked a little bit off on the punches. Seery seemed to have his timing down. I'm not sure if that was down to Seery's movement and head placement, because every time Seery threw a combo, he put his forehead against Brad Pickett's forehead, and he got in and out pretty decent. So I'm not too sure if it was the weight cut. But do you think it was better for him to fight Seery first than rather fight Ian McCall in his first time down to flyweight?
I don't think it was better. No, I think he'd have been better fighting McCall, but there was no choice there. It was Seery or nobody. It was a lose-lose situation, really. Unless he beat Seery by knocking him out in about the first 2 minutes, he wasn't really going to do anything to impress too many people Pickett. The only guy that was going to win in that situation was Seery, because he was fighting a guy that everybody expected him to lose to. But
yeah.
I think that he's done enough by winning the fight, and he took the guy down constantly every time, which was quite surprising actually.
You see, I think Pickett can be satisfied with the win last night. Obviously, it's a late replacement, change of opponent. Seery's no chump. You know, his record's not the best, but clearly we've seen his performance last night. He's no chump. He had great ground defense, great stand-up. I don't think Pickett is happy with his performance, you know. Would you agree with that too, Greg?
Oh yeah, definitely. I think Pickett was looking to go in there and win and finish the guy, to really make it obvious that they should make the fight with Johnson next. I think he really wanted to impress and let everybody know that he was definitely the next man to fight Johnson. But by just winning a decision, he didn't do that. So yeah, I think he will be disappointed with his performance.
Okay. Brian, give us your thoughts on the bout between Brad Pickett and Neil Seery.
I kind of compared a lot to where Daniel Cormier was coming into his last fight. Supposed to be a big fight to really launch him into the division, and then shit happens, and it's just a fight. And Daniel finished it how he was supposed to finish it against a no-name guy, and Pickett didn't. Is Seery that much more of a guy than Patrick Cummings? Hell, we don't know. But I was very unimpressed with Pickett's stand-up, yet very impressed with his takedowns. So it was kind of a win-lose fight for me as far as looking at Pickett. I from round one, I thought Seery held his own just fine standing with the guy, and in round three, he was getting the better of the stand-up pretty easily, I thought. And Pickett was just kind of winging. He reminded me of Vanderlei, smaller Vanderlei. I hate when guys don't throw good punches, and I saw a lot of that from Pickett last night. But his wrestling was great, and his control on the ground was really good too. So it's an unfortunate thing where you can't build a title shot off of this fight. You can't. There's no reason to. Yes, he was great in the division above. He's got a previous fight with Demetrius, but it just you can't build it. He needs another fight, unfortunately, at this time. As Greg said, it's a lose-lose for him. So if he dominates him, a la Daniel Cormier over Patrick Cummings, you got a better case. But it's still even that we're not screaming for Daniel Cormier to fight for the title, and we shouldn't for Brad Pickett either.
Well, you mentioned the takedowns, Brian. I personally felt they won Pickett the fight and saved him from a major upset. Would you agree?
Absolutely. If he doesn't get the takedowns, that's a 50-50 fight.
Yeah, because I think Pickett took round one. I think Seery took round two, even though Pickett did get the takedown late in round two, but I felt it was a little bit too late. And round three, Seery was starting to tee off. He was landing the better shots, the cleaner shots, and Pickett managed to get the takedown halfway through round three, and I believe that actually just stole in the fight. But that brings me on to another question though, Brian, because he was good off his back. Seery was really good off his back at defending, and he got back to his feet a couple of times. He managed to work his guard and get back to his feet. But do you think he could have attacked more off his back? And if he did, it could have won him the fight.
No, you can't. It's the UFC. You can't win off your back. It doesn't. No, absolutely not. If Pettis doesn't beat Guida, then it's impossible to win a fucking fight off your back in the UFC. And it's impossible for fans to see it. Guida did absolutely nothing against Pettis except for defend attack after attack after attack, and everybody felt handedly, except for Bas Rutten and myself, that he won the fight. So, no. There's nothing, absolutely nothing Seery could have done. Could have had a fucking gun and he's going to lose that fight.
Hey, you mentioned Bas Rutten, he defeated Kevin Randleman off his back.
Yeah, and since then, it hasn't happened since.
That is true, that's true. Very rare. I believe I've seen it once before. It might have been, could have been Cole Miller, possibly. I'm sure I've seen somebody do it before, but it's very rare. I do agree, it's very rare.
It's unheard of.
Okay, let's bring in Derek on this. Derek, give us your thoughts on Brad Pickett versus Neil Seery.
I was shocked that Neil Seery didn't get finished in the first round. I thought this, older guy, I think his record's like 14-9, was just gonna be feeder for Brad Pickett, make him look like a monster. But I don't know, Pickett didn't come out of that fight looking like a number one contender to me. I'm thinking Brad Pickett's probably got to fight at least one more guy before he gets a title shot. Probably someone like Zach Mikowski.
Well, he was supposed to face Ian McCall. Would you just put him in against Ian McCall now?
That's also a good fight. I would also, John Moraga needs a fight too, so I guess he could fight Zach Mikowski, and then that kind of shows who your top 5 is after those fights finish.
Well, we're talking about Brad Pickett, but what about Neil Seery? Dana White, you made a positive tweet about Seery's performance last night. Expecting to see him back too?
Absolutely. I think he'll probably fight that Phil Harris who lost last night.
Well, there is one good thing for Brad Pickett. He has defeated Mighty Mouse before, so holding a victory over the champion of the division does help you immensely. So, and it was his first time down. So, well, it wasn't the best fight for Brad Pickett. I believe it didn't hurt him too much. It still keeps him ranked fairly high. So, okay, let's move on over to round 3. Michael Johnson versus Melvin Guillard. Now, the story coming out of this fight was the apparent running away of Melvin Guillard throughout the fight. Now, I didn't see no Caleb Starnes running man, but apparently Michael Johnson and Dana White felt that Melvin ran for most part of the fight. Would you agree with that statement, Greg?
I didn't think he ran. He just didn't engage. He didn't move forward very much, like he usually does. Guillard usually gets right in, lands a few blows, and finishes the fight. He never looked like he had any urge to make contact with Johnson throughout the whole fight.
How about you, Brian? Would you agree, Ran?
No, I ran. No, but it seems like the way I kept thinking of is, okay, these guys have sparred a lot, and I think Melvin knew what happens when he sparred with Johnson. And he didn't want any part of it. that's what I thought. It's like, okay, I know what happens when I throw punches against this guy and I get fucked up. I mean, that was the look I saw out of him. And no matter what he said going into this fight, I know who got the better of it. Clearly, Johnson must have got the better of it when they sparred before, because Guillard didn't want it. He didn't want any part of it. And no, he didn't run, but he didn't try to win the fight. That's for damn sure. He tried not to get knocked out, and that's sad to see from a guy like Melvin Guillard. He's win or lose, he's usually in an exciting fight, and this was not the case.
I felt he was just waiting to counter. Obviously, before the fight, I felt Michael Johnson, he was the better boxer. Wrestling, probably Michael Johnson's a touch better wrestler too. Bit close anyway, but he was going to rely on the stand-up this fight, and Michael Johnson is the better boxer regardless. And the only chance Melvin had was to sit and wait for Michael Johnson to commit, try and get his timing down, and bang, wallop him. He actually caught him once or twice in the fight. But running away, I don't like this talk of running away. They mentioned it about Machida, how's Machida running away? You see how effective he is. There was another one, what was it? Clay Guida, Gray Maynard. Clay Guida took a lot of heat in that fight. I really enjoyed his tactic. I don't believe he was running, but everyone was saying he was running. Running's when you turn your fucking back on your opponent and run off. These guys, they're walking backwards, they're setting the pace, they're setting the distance. So running, definitely not. Derek, would you agree that Melvin Guillard ran in the fight?
He didn't run. He just didn't want to be in there at all. All he did was step back, and he didn't look good doing it. No, I've been saying this, or just wondering if he wasn't hurt before the fight, if he might not have just, who knows what kind of injury, but just something that made him not want to engage too much. But he did look like he just didn't want to be there.
Give us your thoughts on the fight, Derek. What did you make of both guys' performances?
Honestly, neither of them looked amazing. Michael Johnson did what he needed to do to win. Guillard looked like he was, he just didn't look good at all. Johnson needs a top 15 fight now.
Yeah,
he's been putting them together. I actually a lot of people are saying he should fight Jim Miller, but Miller's fighting Bobby Green next. I want to see Michael Johnson fight that Russian, Rostom the Tiger.
Kalibov.
Yeah, I wasn't even going to attempt to pronounce his last name, but that's the fight I want to see next.
Well, I think that might be a bit of a stretch for him. He is on an impressive 3-fight win streak now. Joe Lawson, Gleison Tebow, Melvin Guillard. But he lost to Reza Medadi via Das. I watched a bout with Shane Roller too. He did take the decision victory in that, but I remember that one pretty clearly. Now, Shane Roller, once he had Michael Johnson on his back, he had him in a lot of trouble. So, if Michael Johnson is to continue this win streak, I believe he needs to take a fight where he's not going to be in trouble on the ground. And if he fights Akhmedov, he's going to be in a lot of trouble. That's what I believe anyway.
Well, and you're not wrong, but that's the thing. When Michael Johnson, obviously he's trying to break into the top 10 and get a title shot. That's what every fighter's trying to do.
Yeah.
If he can't beat a guy who can put him on his back, he has no business fighting in the top 10 anyways. So book the fight, see what happens. He might surprise us.
Okay, Greg, give us your thoughts on the bout between Melvin Guillard and Michael Johnson.
Again, I didn't think Johnson was all that impressive. There was a lot of talk that Guillard didn't do this and Guillard didn't do that, but Johnson didn't do a great deal either. He'd urge Guillard to make the move, so he was wanting to counter Guillard all the time as well. So for me, Johnson didn't do a hell of a lot either. He could have tried harder. He could have cut off the angles. He could have moved forward more often, but he didn't. He got the win, and he was easily the better fighter. But I didn't think it was a very impressive win for him. Certainly not enough to call him a top 10 guy now. But yeah, I like the fight with Kalibov for him next. I think that'd be a good one.
Now, I'm looking at who he could possibly face next. What about Gray Maynard? He's coming off a couple of losses. Decent style matchup.
That's why he won't fight him though, because they never match up a loss with a win.
It's a shame though, because Gray Maynard's ranked number 10, and currently Michael Johnson's number 14. I'm not too sure where they will put him when they update the rankings after UFC Fight Night. But I like that fight. What about Cerrone? Cerrone's been on a bit of a tear. Or do you think that's too much of a stretch for him?
Yeah, it's another worthwhile fight. Cerrone's maybe just a wee bit too high ranked though, I think.
Yeah.
Cerrone's fighting Edson Barboza.
So he is.
Sorry.
Whoa, Cerrone Barboza.
Yeah, and that's an awesome fight.
Fuck you. Oh, I didn't know about that. That's a really good fight. Okay, Brian, give us your thoughts on the bout between Michael Johnson and Melvin Guillard.
Takes two to fight, and while I think maybe Johnson was a 60% game fighter to try to make something happen, Guillard was a 20%, and it still doesn't equal up to 100% of a fight. So it's not takes two to fight, and I don't know how much more Michael could have done. Yes, he fought smart. I mean, you don't run into Melvin. You could knock the fuck out, you do that, but he wasn't, as Greg said, neither one's super impressive. It's hard to be impressive in that situation. It just like fighting Machida, it's hard to look good. And no matter how good you do, if you look at the fight numbers from Masasi against Machida, he maybe should have won that fight, which is kind of scary because that's not the fight I saw. But you look at the numbers, he landed more shots. So it's going to be hard to look good in that situation for Johnson. And in turn, he didn't. But he won the fight. Not every fight's going to be a fight of the night, even though those rankings are pretty freaking poor to begin with. But he did what he could in a pretty minimal situation.
Okay, let's move on over to round 4 and the main event for UFC Fight Night 37. Alexander Gustafsson versus Jimi Manuwa. This fight ended pretty much as we all expected it would, with somebody on the canvas. That person was, of course, Jimi Manuwa, as Alexander Gustafsson recorded the TKO victory in round 2 to earn himself another shot at the light heavyweight title. Greg, give us your thoughts on the main event between Alexander Gustafsson and Jimi Manuwa, please.
Yeah, the fight went exactly as I expected. comment.
No, it didn't, you liar. You picked Manuwa same as me.
I was waiting. Yeah, no, I thought Manuwa would get the big upset and take the win. Right when the fight was announced, obviously, the only thought I thought was that Gustafsson would just dominate him and he would knock him out, which is exactly what happened in the end. But for some reason, I kind of talked myself around halfway at some stage that Manuwa would manage to land something and knock him out.
Oh, he was so close, so close.
Yeah.
He was like within a whisker. He really was. He threw that vicious hook. I just felt like his forearm just sitting in the back of his neck would have knocked him out, but jeez, that was close. Well, we actually finally got to see Jimi Manuwa on his back. How impressed was you with Jimi Manuwa off his back?
Yeah, he looked decent enough. He looked composed. He didn't panic. He held his own. I thought, but although saying that, I think Gustafsson could have stepped up at any point and really put the pressure on him. I don't think Gustafsson really worked too hard when he got onto the top. But Manuwa held his own, shut Gustafsson down, and he managed to get the fight back to the feet, which is exactly what his purpose was, really.
He seemed to get pissed off when Gustafsson poked him in the eye. He seemed a bit tentative before that, but after he got poked in the eye, he seemed to get a bit pissed off and just fuck it, start throwing the hands. Because he seemed a little bit upset because he said he was seeing double, and I think he felt the fight was going to be stopped. And all of a sudden, he just came back out and just bang, he was throwing heavy leather. Absolutely, yep. It was his downfall, obviously, in the end. But
yeah, because I thought he's just starting to open up here, but he opened up a bit too much, and Gustafsson obviously landed the knee, which kind of finished the fight. He probably just took was too aggressive at that point. If he'd kind of held back a bit longer, but I think whatever happened, I think Gustafsson looked like at any point he could have just stepped it up and won the fight.
Okay, Brian, give us your thoughts on the bout between Alexander Gustafsson and Jimi Manuwa, please.
Well, it reminded me of a guy playing with an old piece of dynamite that could go off any time. I mean, he still had to get his job done, Gustafsson, but fuck, he had to be careful. I mean, this Manuwa, it's like he could pop any time, and he had to fight a smart fight, and he did, and but he wasn't terrified either. He still came forward, and he didn't go out against John Jones, and John Jones can land some pretty good shots, but he brought it when he had to, and he brought it really well, and it's probably good for Manuwa. Now they can kind of regroup, take a loss, and work his way up again in a little bit slower pace. I mean, that was a huge jump from him going to Gustafsson, and props for him for taking it, but he's not ready, and I was impressed with him on the ground. He stayed calm, he stayed relaxed, and my first thought is, okay, another British guy on his back. This ain't going to be good. And he was fine. I mean, he held his own on the ground as much as you can expect, and he'll grow from this fight, and I look forward to seeing more of Manuwa in the future, and I sure as hell look forward to seeing Gustafsson fight the winner.
As for the British guy in his back, he's American.
What's that?
I'm saying, as for the British guy in his back, he's American.
He is?
Yes.
So he just fights over there?
He was born in Sacramento, but he moved to Nigeria, I believe, when he was very young. But he's been brought up in Britain pretty much all his life, but he was born in Sacramento.
Well, okay, so he's a Brit. He has Brit wrestling. Come on. I mean, if Michael Bisping was brought over in the U.S., he'd have U.S. wrestling. So it's still British wrestling.
Yeah,
Jeez.
I guarantee you, if Jimi Manuwa was raised in the U.S., he'll have better wrestling anyway. That's for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
But his wrestling wasn't bad. I mean, his wrestling wasn't bad. So that's it's almost like an insult. He wasn't too bad for a Brit.
But yeah, you're right. He impressed me with the way he handled that.
He was calm and relaxed, so that was nice to see.
Okay, Derek, what did you make of the main event between Alexander Gustafsson and Jimi Manuwa?
Well, first off, I thought this is how this fight was going to go. Jimi Manuwa gets taken down, Jimi Manuwa gets subbed, and I thought it was going to take minute 2 tops. And it looked like I was going to be right. Then Jimi Manuwa shocked me and actually like got off up his back, and he made Gustafsson, stand with him, and he looked good, like really good. And that shocked me. He ended up getting knocked out, which I was kind of surprised by. I thought it'd be a sub for sure. But Manuwa looked good in this fight. It didn't go his way, but Gustafsson's the second best light heavyweight, maybe the best light heavyweight in the world. This is a good fight for Manuwa. He looks good, even in a loss here.
Well, I know you seen this last night, Derek, because I seen you posting the in-play thread. Jimi Manuwa, he actually swung Gustafsson round with one arm. Gustafsson tried taking his back when they were scrambling back to the feet. He fucking swung him round with one arm. How impressive was that?
I seen that and I was like, my God, Manuwa's been, he's been practicing that. And you don't want Gustafsson on your back. And he was just like, no, you can't, you're not going on my back there, bud. And just tossed him off. It was impressive.
That was some fucking superhuman strength shit, that. He literally, he must weigh about the same as Manuwa. So he's lifting his own body weight with one fucking arm. And he didn't just swing him back. He actually travelled. Gustafsson travelled backwards off the momentum.
Yeah, it was a really impressive showing there by Manuwa. That guy is strong. He was stopping the shoulder locks, too, with one arm, just with pure strength. It's impressive as hell.
Yeah, he looks a little bit stiff off his back, I'll say that much, but obviously what do you expect from a power guy, that's what Manuwa is. He's not a slick movement guy, he can't move his hips very well, but shit, you don't need to when you got brute horse fucking strength like he has. He could have used his elbows off his back a little bit more, because he must have some powerful elbows. He could generate some power in such a short area, short distance. So I would have liked to have seen Manuwa use his elbows off his back, but obviously he was more concerned about tying Gustafsson up and working his way back to his feet. So, okay, let's move on to our fifth and final round. Fighter and fight of the night for UFC Fight Night 37. Greg, who was your fighter of the night for UFC Fight Night 37?
Gunnar Nelson, easy one. He was the most impressive guy in the card.
Yeah, I was going to go with Gunnar Nelson too, but Alexander Gustafsson, he took it for me. First of all, he took the fight against Jimi Manuwa, and then he disposed of Jimi Manuwa impressively. And it was just the way he did it too. It's like Manuwa was swinging at him and swinging hard. Instead of moving backwards and, shying away from it, he actually embraced it and gave some back, and it gave him the finish. So absolutely impressive there. And he actually gave Jimi Manuwa his first loss and first knockout loss. So, Brian, who was your fight of the night for UFC Fight Night 37?
As impressive as Gunnar was, I don't know the quality of the opponent very well. So I have to go with Gustafsson, because it was a dangerous, dangerous fight for him. And he finished it how a lot of us thought he wouldn't finish it. So he did well. He took a very dangerous fighter and finished him in the second round. And he did it in impressive fashion. So I have to say Gustafsson, but Gunnar was impressive. I mean, I need to see him against a more talented, at least somebody I know better on the opposite side of him.
Yes, for sure. You can see it in the suicide pool in the MMA Crypt fantasy section. It's like everybody shied away from picking Alexander Gustafsson. Not many people picked him. I think there was 3 out of 10 people. So
yeah,
just goes to show we all sort of knew he was facing a tough opponent with knockout power. Derek, who was your fight of the night for UFC Fight Night 37?
I'm actually going to go off the radar a bit here and pick a guy who lost and say Neil Seery was my fighter of the night. He was supposed to be feeder for Brad Pickett, supposed to get finished. No one thought he was going to win, and he actually got a decent fight out of Brad Pickett, which I was shocked by. I want to say he's my fighter of the night.
We sort of all picked different guys here. There was quite a lot of contenders. I was impressed with a lot of guys last night. There was some good showings. The last couple of cards not been too impressive. They've been sort of clear cut. Last night was pretty tough. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think so too, because even on the undercard there was a couple of Latifi. Nobody thought he was going to submit Diabate.
Yeah, I had Diabate by submission, man.
Yeah,
Fucking
that was
submitted him himself.
That was a surprise. And Luke Barnett looked excellent. Looked really good.
Okay, let's move on to our fight of the night for UFC Fight Night 37. Give us your fight of the night, please, Greg.
Fight of the night was Pickett and Seery for me. I know the the UFC gave it to Gustafsson Manuwa, but for me,
Yeah.
I thought Pickett Seery was just a more entertaining fight all round.
Yeah, I didn't agree with that. That was pretty poor to give it to them too. You know, you can give it. It was an entertaining fight. You know, it really was, to finish in the excitement, but that was mainly due to Gustafsson, the dramatic finishing, the way he finished it, and he sort of got his reward in a way because he got performance of the night. So obviously, you can see I agree with you there, Greg. I agree. Neil Seery and Brad Pickett. That's my fight of the night also. Brian, give us your fight of the night, please.
Same, no different. I agree with those. Seery really stepped it up, and hopefully he got a little bit extra money for that showing because he made a really good fight out of it, and I look forward to seeing him again in the future. So Pickett Seery was a good fight, so that's my fight of the night.
Yeah, someone mentioned that on the crypt. It would have been nice for Seery to get a nice bonus check. You know, he pretty much deserved it. He really did.
Absolutely.
Cause he needs it more than the rest of the guys, you know. Does Alexander Gustafsson really need an extra 50k? You know, he doesn't. Maybe Manuwa, but give it to someone like Seery, especially when it's so close as well. Well, I want you to say it was close. I believe they had a better fight, to be honest with you. But
No.
yeah. Okay, Derek, give us your fight of the night, please.
I agree with you guys, Pickett Seery, and I really don't like the fact that Seery didn't get that extra 50k. Like you said, he's 34 years old. The guy could have used that more than Gustafsson, who's probably reaching that almost millionaire status now.
Totally agree. Well, looks like we're all unanimous in Pickett and Seery. So, obviously the UFC were wrong there. Okay, that's a wrap for today's show. As always, check out MMAcrypt.com. Thank you for watching.